Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be discussing how to simplify complex fractions involving variables. So if you didn't watch the video about simplifying complex fractions with numbers, I would suggest doing that first before viewing this video, because you'll see a lot of the same underlying structure and background that's going to pertain to simplifying an expression like you see on your screen. So what I want to review before we try this problem, though, is I want to review finding the least common multiple. So suppose that I have these two terms and I want to find the least common multiple. Well, if something's going to be a multiple of this first term, it's got to have all of the factors from that first term in it. It can have additional stuff, but it has to have all of those factors. If something's going to be a multiple of the second term, it has to have all of those factors in it. It can have additional things, but it at least has to have all of the factors present in that second term. So how do we do this? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go factor by factor, and every single factor that I see has to be in my least common multiple. If there are any common factors, I take the highest power of any common factor that I see. So we'll start with the 2. So one of the factors I see is just this plain old 2. So that's definitely got to be in my least common multiple. A second factor that I see is this x plus 2. And I see it actually in both terms. So if I look at the exponents, I take the higher exponent, which is 3. So my least common multiple is going to have an x plus 2 to the third in it. Another factor that I see is x minus 1. And the last one is an x plus 3. So that would be my least common multiple. The reason why that's relevant is our first step here is we want to find the least common multiple of our little fractions. So what I mean by little fractions is if I just consider the top part, the numerator of fraction, and the denominator of fraction, I want to find the least common multiple of x plus 3 and x minus 3. So that's going to be our first step. So as we just saw, the least common multiple between those two, well, it has to have an x plus 3 in it, and then it also has to have an x minus 3 in it. So our least common multiple is going to be x plus 3 times x minus 3. So once we have that, our second step, step 2, is going to be to multiply the numerator and denominator by that least common multiple. So when I say numerator and denominator, I should probably be, again, more specific than that. So I'm talking about the numerator and denominator of this big fraction right here. So the numerator would be this whole thing, what I called the little fraction before. And then my denominator would be this whole guy, what I called the little fraction before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator by this least common multiple. So here we go. So I'm going to multiply the top by x plus 3 times x minus 3 over 1. And then whatever I multiply the top by, if I don't want to change the value of the original fraction, I have to multiply the bottom by that same thing. Okay, when we do this, if I just look at the top, if I look at the top part of the fraction, I'm going to end up with x times x plus 3 times x minus 3 over, and if I multiply the bottoms together, I just end up with x plus 3. Okay, in the denominator position of the big fraction, when I multiply my tops together, I end up with 5x times x plus 3 times x minus 3. On the bottom, I end up with, when I multiply my bottoms together, just x minus 3. Okay, what I want you to notice is that if I just look at the top part, just the numerator, you'll notice I've got this x plus 3 and this x plus 3. Those are common factors, so I can divide those out. I can divide top and bottom of that fraction by x plus 3. That's going to leave me with a 1 there and a 1 there. Same thing on the bottom. I've got this x minus 3 factor in common, so I can divide out there. And now what I'm left with on the top is just x times 1, which is just x, times x minus 3 over 1, which I don't need to write anymore. On the bottom, I've got 5x times x plus 3. So notice I've got one single fraction now. I've got one numerator and one denominator, and there are no fractions within the numerator and denominator. So the last step is to just divide out by any common factors that we have left. So what you should notice is that I've got an x on top factor and I've got an x factor on the bottom. That's a common factor, so I'm going to divide out top and bottom by x. That's going to leave me with a 1 here and with a 1 there. So my final answer is going to be 1 times x minus 3, which is just x minus 3. You could either leave parentheses or not have them. Either way, it would be equivalent. On the bottom, I'm going to have 5 times x plus 3. And I've accomplished my goal because now I just have one single fraction, one numerator, one denominator without any fractions within those. Okay, so here's another problem. Pause the video, give it a try. When you've given it a try, go ahead and restart and see if you have the correct process down. Okay, so our first step again is to find that least common multiple of those little fractions. So I'm going to just put parentheses around the little fraction on top and the little fraction on the bottom. So we want to find a multiple that's common to both x minus 3 and 3 here. So if we do that, our least common multiple would be just 3 times x minus 3. So then what we're going to do is multiply top and bottom by 3 times x minus 3 over 1. 3 times x minus 3 over 1. So if we multiply tops and multiply bottoms, on top we're going to have 21x, 7x times 3 is 21x, times x minus 3 over x minus 3. In the denominator, we're going to have 5x squared times 3 is 15x squared times x minus 3 over 3. And now we should look to cancel or divide out by common factors that we see within the little fraction on top and the little fraction on the bottom. So here we go. On the top, you'll notice that we've got this x minus 3 and x minus 3. So if we divide out top and bottom by x minus 3, you would end up with just 1s. On the bottom, you'll notice I've got this 3, but I've got a 15 in this numerator position. So 3 is a common factor to both. So I can cancel this 3, I can divide out by 3 and end up with a 1. If I divide out the 15 by 3, I end up with 5. So now putting everything together, we end up with, on top, 21x. On the bottom, we end up with 5x squared times x minus 3. And now the last step is just to look to divide out by any common factors. Well, one common factor that I see again is we've got an x factor on the top and an x factor on the bottom. So I can divide out by an x. That makes this guy a 1. And since on the bottom I had x squared, when I divide out by x, I'll just end up with x to the first. So my final answer is just 21 over 5x times x minus 3.